Hi, welcome back to your show. My name's John Davies. We're going to be talking for about half an hour or so with a couple of guests that are sitting with me. Helen Marks, old friends, and Rica Bird. Helen and I were both in Riverside. We're going to be talking about what happened in Riverside, Louise Ellman. We're not going to go over in great detail because it's a very well-known story, but we're going to fill in the background of that and then see what we think of the implications for now. But before we start on that, I just want to show you this prop which I brought in, which is a piece of sea-washed coal from the northeast of England. And I'm just showing it you because I just want to mention we had a loss of a really respected comrade 2 weeks ago, Dave Temple, who's the saviour of the Durham Miners' Gala and a leading militant in the Durham NUM, and it's a big loss. So Dave, that's for you. So just to give you some background on Riverside, it was a very big constituency. It's been reorganised now. I was chair of the largest branch, and Helen and I were in the same CLP. And the context of there was a Panorama programme which some of you will have seen, which completely traduced Rica, who's here, claiming she was being anti-Semitic. She's Jewish. And the context of that was quite a lot of ructions and antagonism within the CLP because of Louise Ellman's behaviour, her unstinting support of Israel, her failure to include the reports of that in her monthly MP's report, and the questioning, very polite questioning by Helen of her record. And the CLP was investigated. There was an expert sent up from London, wasn't there? An expert, a young man, a guy called Ben Westerman. And he interviewed 6 of us, including you, Helen. And Rica was Helen's silent friend. Just very briefly, give us a very quick resume of what happened, and I will cut you off if you're more than 2 minutes. Okay.
Right. Well, the idea was that we were going to be interviewed so that Ben Westerman could get a better idea of what was happening in Riverside. And right from the start, I was wondering why only 6 of us were being interviewed. Mm-hmm. And for most of the time, he never asked me. I assumed that I was being interviewed because I'd been accused of antisemitism.
And you're Jewish as well.
And I'm from a Jewish family. Mm-hmm. And but actually a lot of questions were about, is it right that we questioned the chair or that I questioned the chair for a long time over the minutes, and he suggested that was stupid, that I shouldn't have done that.
Sorry, just to say, this was in the context of meetings being gerrymandered, agendas being unilaterally cancelled by the chair because they included things they didn't want to discuss, support for Corbyn, support for Palestine, and they would just be... so the democracy of the CLP was being kind of ridden over, wasn't it?
So initially I thought, well, I'll give it a chance. But actually, as the questioning went on, they were so biased. I thought, because of the nature of the questions, I thought there's something funny here. This isn't really a proper investigation. And then the interview finished, and then he turned to Rica.
Yeah, and he said something like, that concludes things, unless, of course, your silent friend would like to say something. And Rica, what did you say?
Well, I was given to understand that the formal part of the interview with Helen was ended. So I thought, we can have an ordinary conversation now, because I hadn't ever been involved in anything like that before. So because he was a Labour Party member and it was a Labour Party internal investigation, I thought, let's just be comradely. So out of interest, I just said, what branch are you from?
What branch are you from?
And I just meant what branch of the Labour Party, just to make conversation, no other reason.
Yeah.
And he was said to take that the wrong way, and this came out subsequently. I think there was a programme made about 3 years after the interview.
Just before you get onto that, we should say that he wrote a report, didn't he? And in his report to the Labour Party, he made no mention at all of any anti-Semitic incident or any acrimonious exchange with you. There was nothing in his report at all. But then 2 years later...
3 years later.
3 years later.
Yeah.
The BBC made a programme, and the producer of that programme brought in some clips for the programme. It was about Is Labour anti-Semitic? That was what it was called. And in order to demonstrate the point that the programme, he intended the programme to be about, there was a voiceover describing the investigations that had been going on that you've just outlined. And the voiceover said that this investigator sent by the Labour Party met with the very anti-Semitism that he'd come to interview people about.
And he claimed that you'd asked the question, are you from Israel?
That's right.
That's correct, isn't it? That's
yes, it was. Yes, and
he claimed you said that.
And this programme was being made by a very good journalist called Richard Sanders, who was making a series of programmes for Al Jazeera called the Labour Files, and used video from part of that Panorama programme in that programme, which was broadcast later, 2 or 3 years later. And there had, as you say, in between time, been a lot of coming and going about what was said and what was true. Yeah. And what Westerman and his superiors didn't realise was, despite the fact that you and other members of Riverside had got previously permission to take a tape recorder in to each of those 6 interviews, they'd foolishly...
They'd forgotten we got the recording.
Yes. So we could actually prove totally incontrovertible that me being accused of saying something that he took to be anti-Semitic by he thought, or he interpreted, that I was asking him, was he from Israel? Which I wasn't, and I never said that. And in the programme subsequently that I'm talking about, that Richard Sanders was making, I said that part of the clip was an absolute lie.
Yeah.
Because it was.
Yeah. And he never revealed to us that he was Jewish. You of course, talked, I think, a little bit about your Jewishness. My silent friend, because I was interviewed immediately after Helen, my silent friend was the late Sam Samoff, lovely Sam Samoff, who also talked about his Jewish childhood and what anti-Semitism for him, what that really meant for him. So you talked very openly about it, but Westerman never revealed the fact that he was Jewish, which begs the question, why would you ask if he was from Israel?
Also, he never revealed that we were Jewish.
No.
Which I think was...
In the Panorama programme, they do not acknowledge that you were Jewish.
No, there's no mention of that. And, I think that's quite disgraceful, because we know that he knew that about our background. So to accuse 2 people who were Jewish of being anti-Semitic is very hurtful. And left me feeling very angry.
Before we move on to maybe thinking a little bit about the implications for now and that kind of silencing and how that might have continued, do you want to add anything, Rica, or maybe you want to add some more about the personal feelings, personal reaction of all this anti-Semitism, furore?
Yes, I'd like to. First of all, I was incredibly shocked. And I was shocked that somebody on a Panorama programme, knowing that there were thousands of people watching, would debase himself like that and lie. And we knew it was lies. He couldn't even remember whose interview it was. So for somebody to suddenly, after 3 years, talk about anti-Semitism, we knew this was all a concoction, and I felt, part of a witch hunt.
Did it cause any internal tensions within family or worries or concerns from relatives, your daughter, or?
Not particularly, but I just thought it was typical of, you knew it was concocted. And it's very disturbing to think that somebody will quite publicly just lie.
Yeah, we'll maybe go back to the lying in a minute. Do you want to add anything to that? Any kind of personal feelings you had about it?
Well, the feelings that I had really became clearer when there was a research that went on for a play called The Wrong Sort of Jew sometime in 2023. And the character in that play referred exactly to something that I had said at the time, that I was very hurt myself, but even more because a very close family member was also subject to mistreatment by being accused of antisemitism. So it just occurred to me, although I did feel hurt, that the whole question of anti-Semitism has to be explored far more deeply. And the history of inhumane treatment by settler colonialists in other countries just hasn't been explored sufficiently. And the ideology of Zionism is an in for people who want to keep the status quo or want to practice, well, it amounts to clearing land for, other purposes than the purpose given to it by the people whose land it is. And those ideas sort of upset me. And especially, in a personal way, my daughter, who was also accused of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, was badly hounded, and as a mum, I felt for her. So what happened to me was very minor compared to what had happened to her, and that had become clear to me more when the research was being done for the play The Wrong Sort of Jew, more than anything else.
Could I just add something? To make things even worse, that made me really angry, was that Starmer, when he became leader, he actually rewarded the people who'd been on the programme. They were paid off. They were.
These are some of the interviewees making accusations.
Yes, and I was so angry about the fact that they'd been rewarded, and this man particularly being rewarded for lying. I took a complaint out to the BBC, and they just batted it away. They weren't interested really, and then I took it to Ofcom. And again, I was totally shocked that a body that was there to be our watchdog and fight our corner decided, and I think this must be a very unusual decision, they decided not to investigate. And they never told me officially. I found out through somebody else who'd made a complaint. So it's shocking, and so you feel that somehow there's a conspiracy of silence.
Let's pick up on this, the last, I don't know how much longer we have, on this silencing. Because it seems to me, more I think about it and reflect back on what happened 6-7 years ago, that it was, anti-Semitism was the jewel in the crown of those who were just trying to silence politically on a range of issues, but centrally on Palestine. But there were other aspects of that. Within our CLP, we saw, as I mentioned, the gerrymandering of agendas, shutting down of agendas, the fixing of delegates, the shouting down of people, the bullying, trying to intimidate people into silence, making people fearful. And then, of course, the IHRA, the way that was introduced, despite all the warnings that it would be used in the way it has become to be used as a way of defending Israel. What do you think about the current climate of silencing? And obviously we haven't mentioned, Helen, that you were arrested last night. So this links very much to the theme of silencing, doesn't it?
Yes, and it was my choice, because I think what the government is doing now is absolutely disgraceful, that they were using a terrorism law to prescribe Palestine Action, a direct action group. And so people who held up a placard just to say they opposed genocide but support Palestine action. That was mainly to try and get rid of this prescription because it was using up police time, our time, merely for holding up a placard. And we have been now labelled as possible terrorists. And so everybody can see how stupid that is. Time wasting, very expensive. And I'm sure the police must be thinking, well, this isn't what we came into the police force for.
And it seems to have backfired, doesn't it? It's an attempt to silence. It's actually become a big news thing, hasn't it? We don't want you talking about Palestine, but it's now all over the papers. The number of people are being arrested. Just to go back to your experience in the Labour Party, because I remember fairly early on, it was fairly early on when we knew each other, you were accused of, not being Jewish because you'd questioned Louise Ellman. And then when that was corrected, it was a particular Labour councillor who we won't mention locally, he said, oh, well, she must be one of those self-hating Jews. And that's a very common cliched accusation. And that seems to me another example of an attempt to silence.
Absolutely, but there are so many examples. I think, again, what made me so angry about the whole situation, and we can see it continuing, the press never came to check the stories that Louise Ellman was going. She was going around the country, going to all the main media, talking about this really high level of antisemitism in Riverside. Well, we couldn't see it. And none of the press asked her basic questions like, oh, how many people are anti-Semitic? How many people have had complaints? How many people have been... They didn't, because they never came to us.
No.
And again, with the Panorama programme, which media ever came to us? Eventually, and we were very grateful for it, really principled journalist, Richard Sanders, Asa Winstanley, they came to find out exactly what our side of the story was. So again, it's absolutely shocking to think that our mainstream media do not do basic investigation.
Yeah. Do you remember there was that other incident when I think there was a motion moved in support of Wavertree? Wavertree were really being attacked and people had been suspended there. And there was a single, very polite question asked of Louise Ellman. And on the Monday in the Jewish Chronicle, there was an article where it described as a baying mob, there's shouting people.
Oh, I know.
But we had a recording. And you could hear her being listened to in complete polite silence with this one very polite question being asked, and it was just a tissue of lies, the way that the constituency was portrayed. The other thing that strikes me is the whole double standards thing, and this comes out in the way in which Diane Abbott has been treated. In the Ford report, Martin Ford wrote that report, which they've conveniently shelved and tried to forget about racism in the Labour Party, and he talked about a hierarchy of racism. Jackie Walker talked about this too, didn't she? Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because it seems to me that anti-Semitism became this hysterical campaign, which was everywhere, every day there was something on the media, and yet other forms of racism were largely forgotten. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a dog that won't lie down. Accusations of anti-Semitism, because they're based in a long historical development, which goes back actually to Christian Zionism or evangelism. From the 17th and 18th centuries, but it's always used, and it's always the door that opens greater hatred for other people of other faiths. It's the wedge really that allows reaction and anti-human behaviour to be let off really, or to be to be tolerated or encouraged, and I just think that it's it's a huge lie.
Yeah.
You know, there is some real anti-Semitism where people put bricks through your window, but the other side of anti-Semitism is actually making the allegation so that people will be silenced, and that's what's holding back.
Yeah.
You know.
Just to refer to the double standards, you want to come in a sec. The whole thing about this guy who's recently, is it Ovenden, Peter Ovenden, who's recently been forced to resign, making the most. I mean, you'd find them shocking in the rugby changing room of a public school with 18-year-olds. The comments he made about Diane Abbott. Have you ever heard anything anti-Semitic that you could say was equivalent to that within the Labour Party? You know, those kind of. I mean, I never heard any overt anti-Semitism in the Labour Party.
No.
And yet people who maybe posted a like for something were being investigated and chucked out. And yet this character, who makes these really horrible, sexist, infantile comments about a black comrade, is promoted. Is promoted.
Well, I was with Jackie Walker when she was in this so-called training event, and she tried to raise the issue of this so-called hierarchy of racism. And I think she quite rightly said, if you compared the racism towards black people, people of colour, other people, but particularly she was talking about black people like herself, it's far worse than the racism towards and the prejudice towards Jews. I'm not saying that in the past there obviously are examples of Jewish prejudice towards Jews, but in our present circumstance, most black people would say, yes, I've experienced racism. I've got black friends who've experienced racism. But somebody asked the chief rabbi of that time, Jonathan Sacks, had he ever experienced an incident of anti-Semitism? And he said no, and that's the chief rabbi. So I think Jackie had such a good point to make. You shouldn't have a hierarchy of racism. Racism is racism, and all incidents of racism should be attended to.
I just want to go back to the silencing thing. I, as you know, as you both know, I work in the arts, and it's become apparent in the last 2 or 3 years it's extremely difficult to get arts organisations to speak out or to allow work which addresses the question of Palestine. You have to be very, very careful about how you frame it, because buildings are nervous about losing their funding. However, the Royal Court in London, which is the Panorama, probably the most famous theatre for new writing, dealing with political contentious work, going way back, they did a show which was written, co-written by Jonathan Friedland, who's a pro-Israel journalist on The Guardian. And that was all it was called Jews in Their Own Voices, but all the Jews were pro-Israeli, right? And yet the show you referred to, The Wrong Sort of Jew, which was talking to the other Jews who are pro-Palestinian and critical of Israel or anti-Zionist, we didn't get a look in. So that's another form of silencing. Sorry, I've just made a statement rather than asking you a question, but I don't know what you feel about that.
Yeah. Greg Philo, in his book Bad News for Labour, he organised, I think it was Summation, who did a poll, and he asked people, you know, what do you think that the level of anti-Semitism is in the Labour Party? And 62% of people who knew something about the anti-Semitism, they thought it was about 34%. Well, the actual figure was less than 1%. So why I'm bringing that up is to say these aren't innocent accusations. They have real effects on our democracy, on our politics, on people's lives. If I'd still been working, I could have been sacked for being accused of anti-Semitism.
People were,
yeah.
people were.
And people still are.
Yeah.
Because people are so unclear about the definition of anti-Semitism. We know what the Zionists are trying to push is the IHRA definition plus its 11 examples, which is about supporting Israel. But we want to make it clear to the general public that criticism of Israel is not the same as anti-Semitism. So sometimes when the level of anti-Semitism is quoted, I always think, well, what are they talking about?
Yeah, yeah. We've only got a couple of minutes left. I just want to bring it back to now and the banning in the light of your arrest. And the contrast, which just it seems to me, this chasm in double standards between, on the one hand, people like yourself being arrested for holding a placard, which is about the killing of thousands and thousands of children, on the one hand, and you being arrested because you just held a placard, and on the other hand, Keir Starmer's government allowing aircraft to go and reconnoitre Gaza to kill those children. And the moral chasm between the two just seems to be staggering, and yet nobody in the mainstream media wants to talk about it. Sorry, I'm making a statement again. I'm not asking you a question. I'm not a very good interviewer.
It's just what I'm concerned with partly, I mean, I don't deny what you're saying, but what seems to me to be being overlooked sometimes is the resistance to it all. Because you spoke about different people who are Jewish but they're anti-Zionist, and I feel very much an affinity with any Jews anywhere, in particular Israeli Jews, who are saying what's going on is not right. And I see them as part of a far, far, far wider panorama of resistance based around being anti-Zionist, not being anti-Semitic, but making sure that what the Palestinian people are after is their own liberation, and that sort of thing is overlooked, and I am very concerned that we're losing track of, where the vast support is coming from all over the world for what's right and what's humane.
If I portrayed too negative a picture, you're certainly right to correct me, because there is a huge change, isn't there? We're going to have to wind up there. Rica, Helen, thank you so much. It's been a real honour to sit with such impressive people with sound conscience. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.